So Anusha, you handling your screen, right?
Yeah.
Where did my go? Which I have to read your bio. Jesse, you will be removing this at some point, will you?
Which one?
When I need to. Okay, it's there. Okay, cool. No, I'm going to be partly reading Anusha's bio out, so that's what I'm wondering.
Going to read it out? Okay.
It's too involved for me to remember.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Extra Bytes on Exploring Light. Today is another Sunday, and Sundays we have been booking now for all the Extra Bytes sessions, which earlier used to almost happen, I think, almost daily or alternate days we were doing. But anyways, we are still continuing with the session on your popular demand, and so today, before I get on with with introducing the speaker, let me just give you a brief background into this Extra Byte sessions for everybody who's there for the first time today. So when the lockdown started, we were thinking what to do and what can we do meaningful sitting in our lockdown in our houses. And sometime in the middle of April, we came out with this idea of conducting live sessions on YouTube through Zoom only. First session was around 14th or 15th of April. And today we are streaming our 58th session already. So today we have wonderful portrait photographer, wonderful. She's a multi-talented photographer. So I will probably ask Dinesh sir to talk about, introduce her. But still, let me welcome Anusha Yadav. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the show. And thank you for accepting the invite.
Thank you.
And we also have, for the first time on our channel, Chirodeep Chaudhary. And welcome, Chirodeep. Thank you for accepting the invite to be on the panel.
Thank you.
And our veteran, Dinesh Khanna sir, who's again going to moderate this session. And I give this opportunity to you, sir, to introduce Anusha to everybody out there. So over to you, Dinesh.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Anusha, for agreeing to be part of this talk. You are a bit of a difficult, reclusive person, so I thought it would be like trying to pull teeth out of you, but fortunately it wasn't quite that. But theek raha, chalo. And Chiro, thank you. I still have to pull that teeth out of your jaw, which gets you to be a speaker on this platform.
Very soon.
You underestimate him. He's very good.
And that I hope will happen in the next couple of weeks. Anusha Yadav, photographer, designer, communicator, archivist, and of recent times, baker. Would you call yourself a baker, or would you call yourself a pastry maker, or is
I'm a bedtime baker.
I
bake at nights.
And what's really lovely is that even in that, she's carried into that her great sense of detail, a great sense of design, and her great sense of color, texture, and the works. I don't know if you plan to take that forward beyond the pandemic and the lockdown, but I think you certainly have a fourth or fifth profession going already. So
I can't handle the ones I have.
So keep that going. It's a lovely one. All right. So I'm going to read a bit snatches of her own bio, which she sent to me. because I didn't want to leave out the details of what she's done in her life, because it's been a really, really interesting journey, young as she is, but even then, she's managed to pack a hell of a lot into it. So Anusha was born in London and brought up between UK, USA, and Rajasthan in a family that encouraged cultural and intellectual curiosity. I think I should stop there. That says it all. I think that's what makes a person. And I really mean that seriously, because if you are exposed to so many different kinds of geographies and therefore cultures and therefore people, you are bound to be a multifaceted and a person whose entire worldview is a lot more open than what people who normally are of a place and of a particular viewpoint. But let me carry on. She graduated in communication design from NID Ahmedabad in 1997. When NID, getting into NID itself used to be a real big task. And she began her career trajectory as a strategic creative consultant and graphic designer, and worked with leading advertising agencies and design houses for about a decade and a bit more, probably.
Yeah.
So that's one thing which Anusha and I have in common. We've had our initial professional grounding in advertising agencies, and which I don't know what she thinks about it. Hopefully she'll talk about it. But I personally felt that it was a huge influence in the large ways, in many ways positive for me, in some ways probably negative. But I think it was a great place to kind of start off your career. Anusha's work has aided several national and international brands to build and inspire brand admiration, engagement with customers, audiences, and stakeholders alike. It was in 2006 that the language of photography became part of her creative practice, and she has shown her work and been commissioned by several brands, international exhibitions, and publications ever since. It was in 2010, based on insights that personal photographs contextualized with personal stories can reveal the social history and memory of the world, she founded and built Indian Memory Project, which is a multi-award winning and world's first visual and narrative-based archive. Uh, in simpler English, let me explain to you what I feel about the Memory Archive. It is, to my mind, one of the most wonderful things which I have seen. We all have family albums, we all have photographs which we've taken of each other, or we've seen our parents have taken of us, or even our grandparents have taken of their lives, etc. And these are placed in various albums, and normally those albums are placed in cupboards which people don't remember where they are. But they're photographs, and there's a great delight and pleasure when that album is suddenly discovered a few years or even a few decades later. Might be moth-eaten, might have had some termites feeding on the corners of it, but it's just like nothing, a time capsule, and you say, oh wow, this is the way my family used to be, etc. Now, if you can imagine that joy in a website where people are not just sharing that photograph from decades ago, but the stories told very eloquently and very poignantly in along with those photographs. To me, that really is the magic. And it might seem strange that as a photographer, I'm saying that it's the words and the essays and the stories which accompany the picture, which is, to my mind, as important, if not more. But I really do believe that, and I think that's where she has done magic with the archive. Otherwise, it really could have been a bunch of photographs coming from people which are dumped into attractive-looking boxes and formats or templates, whatever it is, and people would have come and seen or whatever. But this is where I think where the Indian Memory Archive and what Anusha has done with it is really world-class and beyond. And congratulations for that, and I hope you keep going on with that. And is something which I really hope people, whether it's individual photographers or institutions or corporates, could be looking at or should be looking at doing for their own archives. That's the kind of structure which probably people should be looking at. I've been trying to pressure her to look at mine. I hope she will at some point, but let's see. We will get there. I'm not going to read too much more. Anusha's interdisciplinary contributions and portfolio with strategic advertising and design, offline and online, photography and archives-based research have won her multiple promotions, awards, recognitions, and speaking engagements around the globe. She is extremely polished and eloquent speaker, which you will now find out once they stop blabbering. And which again is something which I really believe very few of us, Chirodeep is very good at it. He speaks so well
Yeah.
about his work. But that is something which is usually kind of a drawback with photographers. We are mostly visual people and not able to talk about a work with the same kind of eloquence as one would expect, us to, and which is normally true of say poets and writers and what have you. But Anusha is definitely in that rare breed. And so with that, I'm going to hand over to you, Anusha. The
Thank you.
floor, or as they say, the box is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Khanna, for this introduction. And thank you so much. Chiro, thank you so much for coming on this panel. And Jassi, thank you for organizing this talk. I know you said that this is about your journey. And I have thought about that word journey for a while, because I don't believe life is linear. It's not in a straight line. So there is no journey from point A to point B. I literally call it, I was joking with a friend yesterday. I said, they don't know, it's not a journey, it's an orbit. We're just bouncing around planets from one planet to the other. Hi, Raj. Thank you for joining in. You are on mute, Mr. Bezos.
Hi.
Hi, Raj, welcome.
Hello. Hey, Chiro. Hey, Anusha.
Hey.
Hi, Jassi. Hi, Dinesh.
Yeah. No, so I see my life, so far as that you're just bouncing from one idea to another and stealing from here, and by stealing I mean in a good way, like deriving inspiration from somewhere, and you getting inspired by something else, and that's how everything. And I think this I keep going back to the idea, and whenever I get lost in a place, or I'm confused about something, and I believe everything is connected, and that is something that I want to share through this work, that every single thing has connected somewhere, either to my past or it will in the future. I have no doubt about it. And that is something that, doesn't let me lose any hope that eventually some dot will be found and it will be connected to our past. And if you look at any of the talks that you have organized with other photographers, it does. I mean, your past will add up, even a small thing like, food can inspire you in some other ways and in different ways. But I'm going to start the presentation to share screen, right? Is it shared already? No. Okay, now.
You have to share screen.
Yeah, so now see, this is where I have to figure out how to share screen. Yeah. Is this working? Yeah. Okay.
But you can go up to the first slide.
Yeah, so sorry, I'll do that. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
So thank you, whoever's watching. I'll take you through a story. Mainly, please take it lightly. Also, I want to just give a mini disclaimer that 7 o'clock, I have 2 cats, and Chiro would understand this. At 7 o'clock, Rome can be burning, but the cats want their food, so I will take a 2-minute break just to give them that. Maybe they won't make any noise because they'll understand that I'm busy, but let's see. I'll start my journey here. So I was born in London, and my father was a physicist, and he migrated to London, and from a small village. He graduated in math, and he got an opportunity to go to London and do with MBA as well as a PhD, and he did that both actually simultaneously. I don't know how he did it, but he did. And he also along the way picked up a camera, and he became an amateur photographer in a way, documenting his own life, how he was living, his friends, what he did, where he traveled to, and all of that. In fact, so much so that, and I think he was photographing a lot, so much so that I have 10 boxes of just clouds that he has photographed from the flight. And they don't make any sense, but they're just clouds. And I think over time, what happened was that he also was a bit of a snob, in the sense that he decided he's not going to shoot on film. He wanted to shoot on slide film. So he invested in slide film, and then he bought himself a projector. And I don't know how he did all of that in the very little money that he was making, but he managed to yes. So they are very simple. He had a gramophone, a very modern stereo, and he had this projector and his camera. These were his three big investments. But he photographed us a lot. He photographed my mother, me, and on self timer, and he would take these beautiful images, and this sort of became part of the narrative of any photographs. That everything began from here. And then after that, when he passed away, his collection of photographs and projector and projecting them on the slide projector became a way for us to relive those narratives of everything that happened in the past. When it was, how did we move to London? What happened? What ice cream? This is where you cried first. This is where you got lost in the market, and all kinds of stories that happened. But this was also my way of being feeling that he was still around and still a part of my life in some way. And because also, interestingly, I have two younger sisters, and they have absolutely no memory of my father. So in effect, they have had no experience of a father, but I'm the only one in the family who does. And that is something that is, I find it an interesting idea of who experiences what when people in your family pass away, and who holds on to which memory. And I'm the only one holding on to my father's memory, apart from my mother, whose experience I'm sure is completely different. And so therefore, these images have become a part. Number two, it was also my aunts who would continue to tell us stories about, everything that happened in the family. It was family gossip, scandals, and somehow they were all related to pictures, because we had to identify who that person was. And the way you would identify the gossip person and who caused that family scandal was through pictures of what happened and how did it all work out, etc. But also, my family was quite interesting. Yes, it was intellectual and cultural curiosity from the get-go. It was not as if we were not allowed to stay still. I mean, if at all, my mother taught me was how to meditate. That was the only moment that I think you were allowed to stay still. But other than that, there was music, there was dance, I was not very good at math or physics, so there was no much future we didn't have much money at home. So it was quite decided early on that I will have to eventually work. So the option at that time in Jaipur was, at the least, I will become a secretary. So I was sent to shorthand school. I was sent to beauty classes in case the shorthand did not work out and I could wax and thread and do facial to other people. My father was into astrology, so I was interested. And that is also his way of teaching me how to write proper English, which was so he would... And I like it how in his life it became a connection. He was, as a physicist, he was studying the amplification on light and crystals and how light would work across different surfaces. And that sort of led him to study gemology, and gemology got into astrology, and that also was an interesting part. Then it was kite flying, and I'm telling you all of this mainly because eventually this all ties up, and it's very interesting how it does, and without me knowing how it all tied. I became a kite flying champion, one, because it was the way to escape all the family drama. So a rooftop is a great place to pitch up your own tent and fly kites. And yes, there was art, painting, etc., and it all went on to. So yeah, I went to music school. This is like one of the diaries I discovered just recently, where I thought my handwriting was so beautiful. I became very good at studying, at writing and reading Hindi. Also because there are two members of my family, or many are now more members of my family, who were, excelled in Hindi. They were one of the largest Hindi writers in the country. And so that sort of was playing in the background, that they're achievers and you have to do something. And if you're going to do something, do it well, you have to try. And so that effort to keep us polished around culture was nonstop. That it was, and fortunately for us, we enjoyed a lot of it. So, and it was my way of being good at other things, was because I was compensating for not being good at maths and science, and because I was not good at it, even though I really desire, I love mathematicians. I have a crush on every mathematician who will come my way, or a physicist, or anything to do with science. I'm interested, but I think it's also just compensating for that lack of not having that expertise myself. But and then I completed a Visharad in music. I danced Kathak, and all of these things will eventually tie up, because then I graduated and I got through NID. My other option was to get into hotel management, because I was in love with a boy who was in a hotel management, and so therefore I had to do hotel management. But no, it did not work out, fortunately, and I got through NID. And that is when a fantastic education began. I mean, the thing is that for the first few months, for the first few weeks, we were literally just drawing lines, straight lines, and we had no idea why we are doing it. And I, in all honesty, say until my third year, I had no idea what I was doing at NID and why, because nothing made sense. And but just like any education, eventually all the dots just connect. The dark room was an amazing favorite place. It was magic what happened in the dark room. I mean, and we had a lot of fun, and there was a printing press and all the smells of chemicals and the inks, and it was all just sort of becomes a part of your system. And there's a very interesting line said by a psychologist, who said that if you want to understand who people are, then you should just look at just before they became adults, and everything that happened to them becomes a part of who they are, and that will never change. And this is something that, for example, this was one of the, I designed books, and this is one of the first books I had designed at NID, which was, I was a Kathak dancer in school, to a certain extent, competed also professionally in school, including music. And so we had to do a book, so we started doing this. But even the techniques of typography, of embellishments, and these were all techniques, right? You had to, and you would remember people in advertising or who worked in newspapers and magazines, the sitting with bleach and cutting each letter set papers out, xeroxing them, super whiting them. I mean, those were techniques that I'm very grateful that you know how things worked. Now we all love computers and Adobe suites, and everything is so easy, but it's just good to have some interesting background on how things worked out. And it was great fun. And my favorite other passion is cutting paper. So this was a great way to get into something like that. This is where the graphic design journey began. And at NID, I decided to do an internship with enterprise advertising, and mainly because I once attended a party when I was 16 at Dinesh's house, and there was a massive fight over magenta being 10% less, and people started abusing each other about that magenta and that comma in the wrong place. And I loved it. I wanted to have fights like that. I was very clear. I mean, this is the kind of world I want to belong in, where people are perfectionists and they will fight over 10% magenta not being right, and the comma is not in the right place. And it was super fun. And that is and the thing is, NID didn't quite encourage advertising. I think it was not something that they wanted to see their students do, because it was not considered real design. But it was something that I took to. I liked it, I enjoyed it, and I thought this was a place that I might learn something. And at that time, it was saving the world was the last thing on my mind, which sort of NID has that, and it's a fantastic education that it sort of guides you towards doing more social inclined work, more larger ideas. And I don't think I was prepared for that at that time, mentally or even emotionally. It was not something that I was aligned to, but I was more interested in. So I was like, okay, then I'm going to do. I was very clear I was going to join advertising. And yes, there was only one other person who had joined advertising and had sort of become this success, which was Sonal Dabral. And so therefore I was like, okay, if he can do it, maybe it's not so bad. And, eventually NID will come around. And I mean, that time that approval mattered. But anyway, I sort of went and I joined advertising. I worked in McCann. I worked in Enterprise, I worked in BBDO, and it was great fun. You learn a lot, and I agree with what you said in the beginning, that how this career sort of helps you. You learn a lot about people and different kinds of people who do and the kind of teamwork that takes to make a brand successful or anything successful. It's no lesser than a wedding planning. You have to get all your family together for successfully for something to come to life or to happen very well. And it was great to see how servicing worked. What was their job? What was the job of a writer? What was the job of a creative designer? How do you and it sort of helped you. How do you understand focus groups? There's no such thing as focus groups per se, because now everybody is into AI and behavioral understanding, but at that time focus groups was big, and they sort of throw you into the field. And I think the younger you are, the more interesting it is, because I was sitting with people in the studio because there was no space in the office, and then you sort of understand how a lot of things work at the base level, and then you want to think of ideas, but it was a great learning to understand. And what also another thing I felt was that it helps you think in terms of ideas, not in terms of just making things look pretty, or not just and how to marry images with typography and the messaging and how the branding all comes together and how this entire picture sort of comes together. But it was quite, I loved it. I loved working in advertising, and I loved it mainly because it was print, and I was given opportunities like, for example, one of the highlights of my career in advertising was launching Alto Let's Go. Let's Go was my idea with my partner Ashwin at that time, and we single-handedly, the two of us, figured out this campaign and eventually handed it over to the big bosses for them to do bigger things with it, and they made it even better. And this was something that was a feather in my cap, because this sold out the car, and and so much so that it is actually one of the longest running campaigns still today. That because it's very interesting how campaigns trickle down to different consumer groups around the country, and 14 years later this is now running in rural areas, because Alto is now selling to rural area. It's no longer an aspirational car in urban cities, and that is something that I hugely enjoyed. And I also worked on things like, I worked with Gopika Chawla. I actually quit advertising to join a web company, because that was the big thing. And so I was like, okay, no, I need to get with the program, and I'm going to learn how to do web design, what happens in the internet world. 1 year of the internet world, and I sort of, then nothing was really moving at that time. And it was also the year 2000, and the bubble sort of exploded, I think by April of that same year. And I decided that I'm going to go back to design, because I wanted to become better at my craft. And this was something I felt that I lost in advertising, because sometimes you get clouded with the idea of client wants this, and which is great, but it was something that I felt that we could hone and become better, and to be able to think beyond just 3 ad campaigns, and to get into idea of packaging or books and brochures, and how do you make all the collaterals and the amazing things look good. But again, photography was a very important part of it. One of the big things we used to look forward to was a shoot, that you'd get a shoot and you'd get to work with a photographer. And I fortunately was working with some photographers. There was Aditya Arya, there was Jasmeer Singh, there was Dinesh, there were Pradeep Das Gupta, there was Prabhuddho Das Gupta. There were all these people that you sort of, even if you hung around as a younger junior person, but you experienced to see how photographers work. Bharat Sikka, who worked with the Oberoi campaign and stuff like that. But then I went back to design studio, and I remember Gopi said to me that I can't pay you the salary you get in the agency that you work with or the place that you're working in. But I was so hell-bent on finding craft, because I felt that if I didn't have craft, I would not do well. Is that I said, okay, I'll take that pay cut. And I was very happy. And it was the best decision I made in my life, that I took that pay cut, because a design studio is not as large as an agency. It does not have the same budgets. It does not have the same resources to be able to pay people. But it was something I knew I was going to get something out of it. It compensates for everything. And I walked away from that organization with Gopikas, with skill, with a lot of learning, with how to make invoices properly, how to talk to clients, how to make good coffee, how to be a good DJ. I mean, we had a contest about great music, who played the best music, so all these kinds of things, they all add up. So this was one of the assignments I did. I'm very proud of this. And I was told by a gentleman who's now become a friend, who belongs to the Niruda's family, that this actually, they used it for a long time, if not till today. I'm not sure what's going on now. And then I have to tell you this, that in between, right after this, I decided to go to the US, because suddenly I had confidence in my craft, and I had done a lot of work that I was very happy with. And I said, I'm going to go to America and look for a job. And I collected all of my resources, and I packed up my bags, and I said bye-byes to everybody, and I went off to the US to look for a job. And I think I was there for around 4 to 5 months, and nothing happened for a long time. There was no job, so I traveled around. I attended jazz festivals. I lived with friends, and my work I'm very, 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 very grateful for, because it's not easy to have house guests for that long. But anyway, and eventually the last week the first week of September is when I got 2 phone calls 2 emails about meetings in two large agencies. There was BBH and there was Future Brand. And the interviews were actually, the final interview, we had the first 2 rounds, amazing. And then the final rounds were supposed to be on the 12th and the 15th of September of 2001. And I was running out of time, because the visa was going to expire. I was running out of money. It was not easy. And September 10, in fact, we went to a bar at the Twin Towers called Windows to the World. And September 11 is when the Twin Towers went down. And with the Twin Towers went all my dreams and aspirations to become a better designer and even do better and working with either of the 2 companies. And by September 18th, I was back in India with 2 suitcases, no house, no job, but I had 25,000 rupees on me with whatever dollars I could spare at that time. And with that, again, I came back and I stayed. And I joined Photo Inc. because I met Devika Daulat Singh at the time in the US, and she started Photo Inc. And so therefore I find this fascinating, that this was also an exhibition that she organized, where she brought up a lot of photographers from all over the world together to organize the first international exhibition, so to speak, with one subject, and it was about 9/11. And 9/11 was a very big event in everybody's life. We all still remember where were we at that point of time. And I sort of became the design hand for Photo Inc. and started designing collaterals and books and getting in and actually understanding a lot of photographers and a lot of photography. I had not seen that kind of work before in my life, and I was that included work from Indian photographers. I had, documentary photography was not such a big scope. They didn't come by that often. Even if other photographers were working in that arena, you didn't see that work when you're in advertising. You only get to see the side that they want to, that they are useful for at that point of time. And so I was working with, even though the only, so just to segue also, the only work I had seen was of Dinesh doing his own personal work, or Prabuddha doing his own personal work, or Bharat Sikka doing his own personal work. But they used to call it personal work, which I found it interesting because in my brain, nothing is personal or professional, both are the same. But I think it was a way of communicating or articulating that idea that this is not something that a client will buy, but this is something we do for pleasure and joy. And so I sort of understood the pleasure part because it all tied back to my father doing photography purely for pleasure. It was not, he was not interested in, doing anything else. He just wanted to take photographs. And so therefore, it was, this was an interesting experience because I met a lot of photographers, and you would hear them having conversations and the kind of problems they had and the kind of struggles they had. What kind of images were selling, what kind of images were not selling, how to organize exhibitions in galleries, how to understand curating shows, editing pictures. By editing, I don't mean Photoshop. By editing means curating a show or curating a book. And that is something, fortunately, I had started to already get into, which was how to edit pictures with photographs and text and marry them and have and work in a team with it and have discussions about how photographs should be laid out and how to find context behind pictures. And that is also when I realized that actually, and at that time there was a phrase that was becoming very big, which was content is king, because the internet had started taking off. And I have never believed content is king. Good content is king, yes. But I feel what is the emperor is context. Context is what supports content. It is not the other way around. And I continue to believe that. And context and articulation, context of intention, context of everything, on who's creating it, why have they created it, where is it being shown, who's your audience. It's a very powerful thing to understand. But anyway, and this is something that we started doing. I loved working on this exhibition. It was such a big learning experience on how to, and also it was not done with a lot of money for at that point of time. So how to do it with less resources and how to be able to keep everybody happy. Photographers happy, the curator herself to be happy, for the audience to be happy, and for everybody to experience something that was new. And so this was my experience of working with PhotoWink. It was a big learning into the world of photography and also an introduction into conceptual photography, which had not ever come my way, ever. And I discovered a photographer called Sandy Skoglund, and that blew up my mind. And when I saw that work as to what kind of forms photography can do, it cannot just be powerful documentary stuff like Anita Khimka was doing, like Fauzan Hussain was doing, or Shaiwal, or Arun, or a lot of these photographers were working on, but it could also take this other leap into spaces that we have not experienced. And I had not heard of any Indian photographer at that time. And it's not that they weren't doing it, I just hadn't heard of any who were doing that kind of work. And so that whole world exploded, which I'm very grateful for. But I loved working on things. So I was creating books with Anita's work, and this was something that was commissioned by the UN, how to create storytelling, and so much so that I liked books. For me, it's like creating cinema on paper, and that's one way of describing it. I like powerful beginnings, powerful middles, powerful endings, that you should be able to ebb and flow. And I remember being able to articulate it for somebody. This is where the training I feel in music came in, which is something that I have only found to be able to articulate now. But what music and dance did for me was that it helped me find rhythm. And it in rhythm is when you can follow beats. And I think books, paces of edits, uh, all of these things are actually rhythm. And it takes you people on a journey. It takes you up and takes you down, and there are mountains of valleys of emotions and ideas that and that is what a great book is. It doesn't matter what you do in that book, but if it doesn't take you through literally a linear journey of some with some emotional impact, it won't have anything. This was also something where I honed my skills of color corrections for print, and I enjoyed it. I mean, this is like coding, when you fuss over a cyan and you fuss over a magenta, and what the photographer wants, and you're understanding what they want because you are in the press and they are outside, or they are in the press, and talking with printers, how to communicate what clients want from printers. This is where it all sort of started coming into. Started becoming very good at it, and I enjoyed it totally. This was one of the books we did for Bowring's, and I remember I fought for this cover to be for this picture to be on the cover, and it was a scandal at the time. But I loved it. And the thing is, it's also really fun when you find clients. This was actually Tara and Mott, who now run Chatterjee and Lal, who will also equally enjoy the idea and say that yes, let's go for something. Let's make book covers that are different, and we don't have to follow suit. And that's something that will also the idea of how it will be picked up. It will get attention, and great book covers must get attention. Otherwise, nobody will pick them up. And so it was something that I, again, worked on. And this is also then after this time, I went back from advertising to photoing. One, mainly because I was, somewhere I need to fulfill what I feel I miss. And somewhere I felt like I was feeling stuck. And I decided to, in all parts of my life, and I decided to go back to advertising because it would give me that buzz that I wanted. And advertising can be quite a buzz, and things move fast. And then I was like, okay, maybe it's time I can use whatever I've learned and go back to advertising and learn. And it was also something I needed more resources. I did want to earn better money to establish myself better financially. And so I decided to go back to advertising, and I joined Low. And Low is where I also created, which was in Dresden, and it became, now it's Mullen Low. It's gone through many transitions, but that was also where I did the Alto campaign. And then I became a national resource, and then I moved to Bombay. And I think after the Maruti campaign, Balki was extremely open to the idea of me moving to Bombay, because Bombay is where the stars go. So I felt extremely chuffed and excited about the idea that you were doing that good, that you could be. Being transferred to Bombay was like a reward for your hard work, and I loved it. I loved working in Lintas. It had great people. It was, and they were thriving with ideas. There was energy. It was always this people working with different photographers, writers, musicians, singers, producers. It was amazing, and there was a great sense of humor. It was an exposure to me to a different culture. And I remember moving to Bombay, and the first thing I felt was not the freedom to not haggle with an auto rickshaw guy. And I felt so free as a woman in Bombay. And I think, which is when I fell in love with Bombay, was that first thing. And it was just how everything sort of tied up. It made me more self-reliant, which I wanted to be. I did not want to depend on people. I did not want to buy another car. I was not looking for, another car, a bigger house. I was just looking for a good, comfortable, happy life that I could run. Fortunately, My sister was in Bombay and we lived in Bandra together, and she was working with HDFC at the time. But I started doing work with Tanishq. I started working with different kinds of photographers. This was a photographer. This is Prasad Nayak, who I enjoyed working with a lot. And we had great stylists, Shilpa Gupta at the time. And this is where also my journey with photography began. Is basically I remember. So this is how Lintas helped. That Lintas organized a workshop with a photographer called, and everything was building up. This wanting to take photography, and a lot of people saying that you should take photography, and I was not very keen on becoming one. But it sort of built up at my frustration that they were not using real pictures, they were not using better pictures, they were all stock like pictures. It was getting a little frustrating for me to express that I wanted to do something else with the idea of photography and text, and maybe just photography, or just redefine it for myself. But photoing and any exposure to photography thereon also educated me on one very big thing, which was that every photographer has their own point of view, and you cannot be like them. You can only get inspired by them. And so therefore I had equally could do something, and it was my voice, because all these other photographers have their own voices. So I can also have a voice. It wasn't that I felt that I was less than this photographer or more than that photographer, or he or she has done so much better. There's this quote by John Baldessari who says, talent is cheap, and you have to be at the right time at the right place. And so it was very clear that that is something that, for me, it worked out in a lot of places to be at the right time. But anyway, this is my, at that time, my boss, Sriram, who was more like a great friend. This is Rohan. We were all working. We used to work at night. It was great fun to work in Nariman Point and Express Towers at 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to crack campaigns. And I started also, I bought a camera, a small Canon power shot I remember that time it was for 35,000 rupees, and I bought it on EMIs. And I decided that it doesn't matter whether it's a great or not. I have to teach myself how to frame and what do I see, and I want to document how to learn to see how things are happening for myself. It was just for myself. I want to see what it's like. And so I photographed a lot of office life, my own life, whether it was parties, whether it was working, whether it was drinking and having fun. And this was the kind of, and I basically decided to start with something that I knew I had access to, because I also discovered working with documentary and other photographers that access is everything. You'll only get a good picture if you have access. And that you have to build a relationship with people to get better pictures. And just to circle back a little bit, this is also something that I learned with Dayanita, who came for a 2-week course to NID. And one of my favorite courses that she took was that you have to photograph somebody you really like, and you have to photograph somebody you don't know or hate. So it was a very tough exercise that to go with something. So I did it anyway. I understood that you had to have access, and I understood that with other people's work as well, that all they had was access. Anita had built a fantastic relationship with the people she had been photographing. So had Arun Nangla, so had Fazan. These are people who had built relationships, and have some of them, Dayanita herself had built relationships and photographed people over the years and over decades. And so this is something. This is something opposite my house that I saw, and I started really enjoying taking photographs. So much so that I quit my job in 2006, and I decided to go to Brighton to study. I decided that I wanted to do a master's in photography, but not necessarily to learn how to frame, but to understand what photographs say, and how to read photographs. What does it mean to people all over the world? How do you build a series? What does a series mean? And to understand the nuances or something. And this is another thing, which is why I decided to go and study in Brighton. this is another slightly tragic story, was that I reached the campus and they said that you are a citizen of UK, so yes, but you've not lived in the UK for 3 years, so you have to pay international fee, which was that from £2,000 I had to pay 20,000, and so that was not going to happen. So I decided to stick it out for as much as I could, and we went to Paris Photo. That was another, and that also exploded my mind. It was amusing, funny, incredibly great work, not so great work, and you started to see how to judge photography for yourself, and to say that, see, there are so many ways of doing photography. You don't have to, in my mind, and just for me, there is no one style. I just like to explore as many things I enjoy, and I'll take you through that, how it also features in my work later. Is that so? I came back in 2007. I decided to I took up a job, didn't work out very quickly. I became an independent graphic designer, and I started freelancing as a designer. But I decided that photography will become a part of my life, whether I do it myself or I do it for others, and that's something that I continue to maintain, that it will remain a part of my life whether I do it myself or not, and things will work out. So I started photographing again people around me, and that is when I got the opportunity to photograph the Bandra Worli Sea Link. I sort of stalked the gentleman who was a contractor, and I told him, you have to give me permission to photograph the Bandra Sea Link. And he agreed. I don't think he expected so much nagging, but he eventually gave in. And I photographed this just the last few days before permission was allowed, and I managed to get some good photographs. But it was an experience for me to see things differently. And I've discovered that photography to me means understanding the world through images. That's my favorite way to understand the world. And you can only, and I'm so glad that there are so many photographers in the world, because it means there are so many different points. And it's the live evidence of so many points of views. I mean, is there any better evidence than photography to tell us that? Nothing. And so it was, yeah. And so therefore this is also the time I started, Bandra is an interesting suburb. You sort of meet a lot of people, and yes, or our circles collide, advertising, NID, school, etc., etc. And it was quite funny that I sort of managed to make some friends over in the film and theater world, and we had a blast. We hung out. It was amazing, and also I never saw them as celebrities, partly because I remember, and I don't know if you know this, Dinesh, but this series, sort of when it started with that in mind, is that when I was a child and we went to Hoskas to meet my uncle and aunt, who are Dinesh's in-laws. And I remember we walking into the house and my mother insisting that I go and say hello to somebody in the living room. And there were a lot of parties in that living room, day and night, a lot of intellectual discussions between literature circles. And again, it was the same kind of shouting and drinking, but super fun discussions and I remember there was the entire, if not the entire, because my memory fails me a little, but there were the Kapoor family sitting in the living room. There was Raj Kapoor, there was, I'm not sure what Kapoors, but they were there. And I remember them just hanging out. And I refused to go and say hello to them because they were just hanging out in that house. I don't know why they were there. Maybe they came to discuss a script. I don't know what it was, or a story. I don't know what the reason was, but they were there. And for me, it was just so casual. They were just hanging out. There was no celeb stars. There was nobody in that room who was starstruck. Everybody was just discussing things. And that to me was how, as in my life, which is why I never collected celebrity posters, autographs, any of that. It was never part of my scene. It was just that if you know them as friendly acquaintances, but that's all. There is nothing else. So I actually was, funnily enough, the people, when they came into my world, it was with that form of sense of equality, so to speak, that there was nothing lost, and it was only affection, and yes, because I got the opportunity to photograph, and it was great, and they enjoyed it as much, so I did that. This was the first assignment I got for Verve magazine, and this is where it was great fun, where at that time I got the opportunity to somebody called up and said, we need you to go and photograph Rakhi Sawant. And I fell off my chair, because that time Rakhi Sawant was the thing. She was the Kardashian of India. And I was, I'm going to go and do it, because it was an opportunity to go and see this person who you only see on TV in person, and to see what are you. For me, it was an exam. What am I going to be able to do with this? Can I find access? And things work out. It's sort of, you walk into the set and you suddenly realize that the person who's producing the show is somebody you know, and so therefore it becomes easier. They put in the word. They're not on their guard, and this is something I found when she was having actually a quiet moment. And she was exceptionally hardworking. It sort of changes the way of how we perceive celebrities, and that there's a lot of work that they put in of their own, and thus they have other struggles like anybody else's. But this is another time when I saw her in a quiet moment thinking about, and she never gave up at that time. I wish that she had carried on with that grit even longer with her skill, because incredible. She took 30 takes by herself, asked, because she wanted to perfect it. And it's not as if it was an Oscar-worthy movie; it was a TV show, and that I appreciated about her a lot. And she was very cordial, very, very lovely. This is again getting access to friends who were in theatre. This is actually in a workshop in Karjat, I think, where they were practicing for the Blue Mug. And again, this was getting to know them personally. So there was warmth. There was also, I think, there was mutual trust that nobody was taking advantage of the other. And I actually like that, because that is how you build relationships with anybody, is to be able to, that you're not going to exploit that relationship in any form. Everything is permission based, and everything is, it's very, very, very nice. And I enjoyed that journey with them, with photographing people from this business. And a lot of these circles were colliding. We were hanging out with each other, we were partying with each other, we were watching movies together. And that's also when I got deeply interested in movies. And now I can tell you which trailer is going to be a hit and which one is going to be a flop just by watching it, and because the edit is wrong, and it's great fun. This is Vinay. This is when C for Clowns was going on. This was when Dibakar had just finished his shoot for Oi Lucky Oi. This was photographing Vaida Rahman, who was quite lovely, who herself has now become a photographer. I thought it was amazing, that she's picked up something that I'm sure she was curious about. And she enacted, and she performed, and she'll tell you little stories or little secrets, and she has a favorite makeup person the only person who will do up her hair, but extremely warm, affectionate woman. Yeah, it was a pleasure to, it sort of brings back all their childhood memories of watching TV. This was photographing Irfan, and this was an interesting thing, and which is why I want to tie back to how to develop. Maybe there are these not tricks of the trade, but actually finding authentic common ground with people to find an authentic moment, even if it's for 1 hour. Annie Leibovitz' favorite. I like that one quote which she says, "You have to fall in love with people you photograph, even if it's for an hour. You don't have to be in love with them after 1 hour, but for that 1 hour, commit to that relationship." And also because I think, again, these are statements which have been said by several photographers, and I might be paraphrasing, but a photograph is made between two people. When you're photographing portraits, it's made by the subject equally as much as by the photographer, because that relationship just shows. It is that middle moment of meeting is where the photograph lies. Because if the subject is not there, then... And but this also led me that it was just within his vanity van, but it was amazing. And we bonded on the basis that we were both from Jaipur. We also bonded on the basis that Irfan was a kite flying champion of a colony which was only 5 kilometers away. And so, so then I was like, oh, even I am a kite flying champion. And we bonded on discussing manjas and the dhaga and how to make the kite. So it was quite lovely because he immediately warmed up, and it became easy. And he said, ow, ow, and mere saath baitho. And, it was not very long. And it was, I think, 2 hours I got with him, but it was worth the experience of having that access and that trust that he formed. This is a friend that I've just photographed, Mukul Chadda. Mukul is actually a good friend of mine who has become now this big hit of the Office series, and one very, very interesting and intelligent human being. This is another friend of mine, Rasika. And these are the I'm just taking you through this to show that eventually I also decided I fell in love with studio photography. Eventually, I bit the bug because earlier I was completely against it. I was like, no, natural light is where I'm going to do everything. And then I decided that, somehow I saw so much work being done with the interesting work or portraits being taken with light that I decided that I do want to do it. And it's something I understand when people can say that you can control the light, you can control, and it was a different kind of a photograph. It said something else. It was a different kind of messaging. It was a different kind of articulation. And I enjoyed that language equally. Funnily enough, in this particular picture, my lights, this is something that you learn on shoots, my lights did not work. And we were very lucky that there was that Mukul has a house by the sea and there was sunlight bouncing off the water into the window, and we managed to take some pictures. But it was those are the kind of things that you have. How do you make the best of something in shoots that your lights will pack up? I remember once in a shoot I did for Maruti, and that was Deepika Padukone's first shoot when she was 16 years old, and the camera, Aneman's Mamiya packed up, and we did not have a spare camera, and we had to wait for 2 days for another camera to arrive to do that shoot. And these are the kind of things you realize that, oh God, things can go so wrong, and how do you make the best of that situation in that. This is Rasika, and this is something that we decided to have fun with the glamour shoot, and there were different various changes, and I photographed her, and she was herself building a portfolio that she was becoming a bigger success, and so therefore just to see herself as well in different outfits, how does it work out for things, and how do you prepare for roles? It was great fun. Also then working for taking portraits of authors and writers. On the left is Prayag Akbar, on the right is Suhani. Suhani has been part of the Lipstick Under My Burqa. Prayag has written Leela. And these are people I got to know and I meet them. And the thing is that once there is so much trust and faith that I can photograph them everywhere, and of course they know that I'm taking photographs of them. So you have to be that you're not finding them in positions that they would not be able. But to be able to ask them that, so honey, would you just stand at that light? It's so pretty. Let's just take a picture. And they would just do that because it turns out to be a great picture. Or Prayag, who was looking for an author portrait, who said that can you take a picture for me, and it was amazing. And again, this is access. These are building relationships with people whose work you respect, admire, and to have the opportunity to be able to photograph them. This is Ranveer, who's also a friend of mine, and actually who lives right above my apartment now. But again, somebody who I can just say, Ranveer, just sit, I want to take a picture. And he would just do it very sweetly, kindly for 5 minutes, but yeah. This is Danish. And this is something that happens when this is something that belonged to the old shoot that I had permission to play with images, and I would take an outtake from a shoot, cut and paste it, and try and this is where I started getting interested in conceptual fantasy work, and what can I do with one portrait, and how can I full-size portrait, how can I change the scenery, how to play with it, how to create imaginary ideas, and that is something I've eventually now succumbed to, and I actually enjoy. I'm beginning to enjoy that a lot. And that's the beauty of at least the freedom I have given myself with photography is I don't want to get stuck with one style. If you're bored of it, it's fine. It'll you certain subjects will determine what style you should use. It's like certain I say this in graphic design that the content and the context will tell you what typeface to use. And same thing I would apply to photography as well, is that it will and it helps me play, it helps me build and explore and learn about new techniques, new worlds, new ideas, just to entertain myself, because at first for every work that I like to do, I am my first audience. Then there is a second person or a group of people who become the audience, in my mind at least. And this is where I got 2010, just to slightly circle back, because like I said, it's not a journey, it's like balls all over the place, and it just sort of goes to and fro in time, is that I got the opportunity to photograph, I got a commission to photograph people in Austria, in Salzburg especially. And the commission was that you have to photograph different nationalities living in one city. And it's a dream assignment to get an assignment like this, to photograph people from different nationalities. And this literally changed my point of view about the world. I learned so much. It corrected so many of my notions. It corrected, which India does the moment you start traveling around it and all over it, and how it challenges your ideas of what India is. But this actually expanded it even internationally, that we nothing is like it is in TV, nothing is like it is on MTV, nothing is like it is on any of this. There's a whole different world out there, and it set a lot of things straight for me, and a lot of priorities as well, personal priorities. This is the lady from the print on the left is actually hanging in the Korean embassy in Delhi, and she's from South Korea. The center is the gentleman in the center, Iran. The woman on the right is from Tanzania, and these are people who chose where they would be photographed. They told, and I remember everyone saying, his name was Herath, I think, who said that I won't be photographed in the rain because it's not raining in Iran. It hardly rains. It's just cold, or it's just hot. There's nothing. So I just want rain. The Korean lady wanted to be photographed. She actually used to run the bar. She was part of running this restaurant. She wanted to be photographed in a restaurant. The woman on the right hand from Tanzania I said, but why this location? You say, oh, because I find this woman, she reminds me of me, and I am a dancer, and I want to be photographed in front of her. And these were beautiful, private, one-on-one interactions, again, for hour, sometimes half a day. Sometimes it could go on to 6 hours if I didn't have any other appointments. But this was one of the most incredible experiences of learning about different cultures, different countries, albeit through only one person, but it gives you an idea of how the world is. It's incredible. It changed everything. It changed my whole idea about how to work, how people play, how to, what do you say, fuel that curiosity that you feel about the world. I mean, I met a gentleman called Mark who said, let's take you to all the secret church hideouts in church. And so he showed me all the secret passages in churches that are 500 years old, 1,000 years old. And it was an incredible experience to harness and encourage that curiosity. And nothing was off limits, right? And the beauty, can you imagine, I'm going to drive from here to Nariman Point and I'm in another country. From Austria, I reached Italy to have ice cream. And that was the kind of, exciting things that happened. This was also the time when for the first time in my life, I got upgraded to business class. Oh my God. Once you go business class, it's very, very hard to travel long distance. I'm very happy with domestic being the way it is. It's fine. But long, it changed the amount of buttons I discovered on a chair. I mean, these are things that I totally enjoyed. And you just get lucky, right? It's not as if something, just, somebody was paying for it or not. You just got lucky. But it was a great fun experience. The woman on the left from Venezuela, she decided that she wanted to cook because she loved cooking. And so she had cooked a feast and she brought it along with her. And she brought her dress along with her. In fact, she said, this is the dress I wore just before, on the morning of my wedding or the day before my wedding. And she didn't even fit into it. So we had to put safety pins behind it just for her because she wanted to be photographed in that. And she wanted to feel pretty. And I think it was incredible. The gentleman in the middle is from the US who says, I survived 9/11 or I survived Bush or something like that, he says. But he ran a shoe company. The lady on the right was another fascinating experience, which also blew my mind about how, how we perceive Indians out of India and how people live different lives, and that they might be Indian, but actually they have nothing to do with it. So this claim that everybody who's an NRI is an Indian per se because of their part, it doesn't work out. And she was fascinating. She was managing a sex store, and it was a whole other world of, she invited us to the shop and took us around and had great insights into people's buying habits and behaviors, and it was amazing. This entire experience was quite amazing. This is how this show was eventually displayed. It was actually large prints were made, and it was also a book actually, but it was also, they were two, and Anya's work and my work, they sort of collaborated. So together we photographed around 162 people. I photographed 64. Anya, who was the other photographer who on this project, photographed another 64. Yeah, and we did this whole book together and then a show together, and it was beautiful to see your own work put up like that. And this was all over the banks of the river. It was quite lovely. And this is when I actually, when I came back, is I took a break and I went to, and at that time I remember everything was good and happy. And then in between, suddenly the work sort of dropped off, and I started struggling with money again, and I decided to cut my resources. I'm a bit like that. When I will cut my resources and pay and live according to what life permits me to. I don't have a problem with going up and down about things. And so I decided to move to Bangalore for a while until things got better. And I went to Bangalore and I had a roommate who was in sports management, and I lived in one room out of one suitcase for 6 months. And that time I worked on memory. In fact, I redid the entire, I'll take you through that. I redid memory project. I sort of calmed down. I got my priorities together. I went for counseling, which I think every creative person should go for, because it is one of the most helpful things one can do. Is that it helps you untie the knots and sort of be more authentic to who you are, what your problems are, what your patterns are, and how to resolve and work with them. So, and this is some advice that I got from a friend of mine who said that, and I think it is actually every creative person should go for counseling every 5 years, because it's very helpful to talk to people who are not going to judge you for your ideas, and maybe they help you see something that you hadn't seen before. I remember once snapping at the counselor and saying to her that you are not telling me what to do. And she said, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to show you how your mind works. And that is when some penny dropped. It was great and to have that work out. Nonetheless, I came back, and guess what would be the first thing? I got a great assignment from Adidas. That's what happened. From Adidas Germany, from a design house there, who was doing a series on Adidas, where a day in the life of Adidas across countries. And I got the commission to do India. And it was actually a great assignment. There was a budget to buy clothes for people and accessories, and all you have to do is photograph them using it or using that product. And of course, I fortunately also knew people who like sports, who are really into sports, who are like great fitness fanatics, and And so I got that commission, and that helped me. That was also the time I decided to move back to Bombay, because I thought, okay, now I was ready to. Bombay is my best, is my favorite city in this country. There is no better city for me. It might change in the future, but right now, because with me, things can change. But having said that, it's the most amazing city. It has taught me everything. It's me open-minded, opportunities. You learn so much. You learn humility, everything, and it's a very grounding level. I mean, I don't think I would have met people like Chiro or Raj or any of these people sitting in another place. And there's room for conversation and fun and humor, and to take things lightly. That's another thing I discovered in Bombay, was a sense of humor. People take things quite lightly, and they even they wear their passions strongly, but they're light. They it's quite amazing. And I think it's the sea which plays a role. I have a theory that people in landlocked places are different from people in open by the sea. I think it's got something to do with the port. There's a water body makes a difference in people's lives. So therefore, the first thing I did was, of course, look for a home. And I did not have a very big budget, but I struggled to look for a home, because there were other issues. Well, I love Bombay. There are issues like single women will not get house. You will not have a house with pets. You will not have all kinds of other random things that happen. But anyway, I found one. But it also suddenly evoked in this idea in me that how a home is so important, and I want to do a series on women who uh, who have their own homes, who live independent lives. And the thing is, interestingly enough, I was doing it for a while and I did not even know it, because that is something that I said, this is something that I started documenting, just family and friends or people I would meet on other shoots that give me the opportunity to see them at home. And that is how I parallelly. So this is not like an actively thought out. This was not something one day I decided I'm going to do this. It was something that came together as a series, because I realized I had this, and that I had done this subconsciously, working on the site. I photographed friends in their homes, and there were a lot of them were independent women, working by themselves, handling families. Or if they had families, how they had their own spaces that they had figured out. A lot of them were work from home. I mean, we think work from home is new. No, a lot of women have done work from home for decades and centuries. So the lady on the right was the original Seema auntie. She was a matchmaker, and it was brilliant. And I met her on some completely other shoot, and this was a home. She worked. This was on the left was Juhi, who was a VJ at that time again. This is another friend's mother in Delhi. And this was also done across, different cultural backgrounds, economic backgrounds, personal life backgrounds. They were each one differed from the other. This is how it was actually displayed in Mehboob Studio in Bombay for one of the events. This was then, this is something that I actively chose to do, mainly because it suddenly had become my mother was watching this show a lot. I had friends who were watching this show a lot, which was the Z champions of, Saregamapa champions of music. And so, for example, this was, and this was mainly because my music training was, I wanted to see what it's like to participate in contests now, because I used to participate when I was younger, and we were very happy just bringing trophies home and sit down, and life went on. The next day, you're no longer a champion, you're back to, growing in your math. But this was a different world. This was about performance and vanity and TV and how people see you and audiences and so much going on that it was so I did this over a month. I photographed them from, at home. And it was quite lonely for a lot of them, but I would not take away one thing from them: hard working people. I mean, little children, but so hell-bent and competitive. A lot of it insisted by themselves to a lot of them insisted on their own that they have to participate, and their parents supported taking leave from home and staying in these apartments in Mud Island. So not Mud, there was, I think it was, but in the north of Bombay somewhere, I'm forgetting where. But going through classes, then being styled, then being dressed up, which they're not used to, which they're stressed out about also, because on their mind there is this whole contest. And then this was also one of those reality kind of shows where you get eliminated. And so there was a lot of stress that played a role in their lives. And then I sort of, one of the ways I got access into this group was these kids asked me to sing. And see, now this is where my music education pays off, that I could sing. And suddenly you were in because you could hold a sur. And that is something that helped me gain access into their lives, that they were comfortable, or at least barely comfortable having a photographer hanging around taking pictures of them.
Anusha, can you just straighten your camera? It's kind of tilted down a bit.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
You're only looking at your fringe for the last 5 minutes.
It's okay. It's a good fringe. Yeah. See, I got my own hair, by the way. I've become very good in this. Everything. The beauty school. See, now this is where it's helping in the COVID situation, in the pandemic. It's taking. This is where the beauty course has helped. I can take care of it. But anyway, so this was, again, I mean, these are familiar sights. Outside my own music school, there used to be a dog or a cat hanging around there. And this was this is when they also changing and dressing up and checking out dresses and shoes, and they're being styled, they're being groomed, and until they go onto stage. But eventually I walked away from this feeling that that really encapsulates the project for me, because it was very lonely and very stressful for these kids. And I think they don't even, and it's not as if the parents have done it to them. I think they themselves and their peers, and we do things that we don't know will overwhelm us, and we've all done that, and we've taken too much than we can handle, more than we can chew. And I think this was something, but eventually I think some of them had fun, but I'm sure it was extremely strenuous on them. This was a series I've got commissioned by Abhishek Poddar for Mumbai Mirror, I think. Yeah. And this was basically, they were documenting how, this is also like the story of emerging India. They were documenting how people, live their lives. And I got the city of Kochi, and I decided to actually work with as diptychs because I enjoyed that idea, and it was a completely new, different culture for me. I lived with the friend's relative for a while, for 10 days, and then eventually found ideas that I could work with, which was, I found there were people working there, and how do they work in the day, play at night, how does this work out from 9 to 5? And so this was something. I met a lot of amazing people and amazing new ideas and every assignment is a learning assignment. I mean, you do this work sometimes purely for the quest that you learn something because of it. And this is just to take you through how my photography style has changed. By change is a wrong word, but sort of touched or expanded, or I've touched upon a lot more styles, and sometimes I begin to just see an idea in my head and I just would photograph. But these are friends and family who have photographed, but who's also been extremely generous to just, agree to do things. And this gives me a chance to experiment with ideas, which I wouldn't be able to otherwise. This is my mother, whom I photographed, dressed up. And this is the first few times that I was learning how to use the light properly. And I teach myself a lot of things. I love it. I find I'm more at peace. I'm more patient when I'm self-learning. And my mother had not actually worn makeup since my father had passed away. So this was one opportunity for me to help put makeup on her and dress her up. And they say, okay, just stand and pose for me. So this was something that I made her do. And she was the one who was awake at 2 o'clock at night asking me how many people have liked her photo. So that was a big one. I think she really enjoyed this one. These are my nieces. These are Dinesh's daughters, Myra and Mahi, and I've seen them as actually there might be a 3-4 year difference in them, but they are twins. And this is something I saw in my head, or maybe I saw a reference in some movie. I don't know, but I saw this image and I decided to photograph them. So it was a good thing that they come around. Fortunately, they both have black ganjis and say, okay, now let's just sit and I have a flower. We'll just put this and let's just. So it was good fun to be able to experiment with things, that they would. And these two girls are very used to being photographed. So, it was at least, it was like, let's have bread or toast. Yeah, sure. Let's just sit. Yeah. And the ability to look in the camera as if it's just another member of the family, which it is actually. Then of course this is a picture which these are friends of mine. We chat into Indian Idol, but this is something I've always I was wondering if Kavita is like that. She's a friend of mine. Her name is Kavita. At 11 o'clock at night, her watch starts ticking. She needs to go to sleep, but it's also this very sweet thing of wanting to remain alert while I talk, but going off to sleep. But this is what I saw with her, and it just something that happened. It was very fun. Another friend, Michael, I'm photographing him in his house. Another friend, and this is something that I started photographing friends in my new house. Was couples, again, just to be able to explore. Also training myself about poses and sitting, and what does a portrait sitting mean. How long does it take? I mean, so many things. Like, this was a very hot day, but these two were patient. And I think because Tilottama is very used to shoots, and so therefore a lot more patient, but it was a very hot day. And then things like this, you can have fun, which was last year, where we recreated the Last Supper, mainly because it was there to be done. I mean, so, you could. See, we won't have 13 people, but we have whatever people we have, we'll have. You have friends like that who will play along. And I'm very grateful for that. To people who like to play with you as an artist, who are happy because there's faith, and there's happy because something may or may not happen out of it, but at least if it happens, it'll be fun. And I think that's people underestimate the joy photography can also offer, and I love that. I love the laughter, the giggles, the maza in what it can bring to people's lives, and not just saving the world, but also saving the world with laughter, saving the world with some lightness. And I have that. This is some of the client work, and this is I'll just show you quickly through some frames, this was something that I had done for Vodafone Foundation, Zarina Screwala for Roli Books. And this was a book on women empowerment. And so they had given us a list of people that they wanted to photograph. This is Safina Hussain, who's done fantastic work on child education. Amazing lady, amazing woman. This was something that I was telling you, was the Adidas work that I'd done, which was one of the frames for the brand book. This is something that I did for Pidilite 2 years ago. And then I did another assignment with Facebook, which was similar to this. Which was again, of course, people and professional. This was an interesting assignment also because Pidilite is something that came through a batchmate of mine from NID who was designing the whole thing. And I like that collaboration of where you are not the designer, somebody else is, and they're good designers and you're working with them to bring their vision to life. And these were people who work in Pidilite. They are staff, they are distributors, they are, and so documenting portraits of them. And then I come to Indian Memory Project. And I'll take you. So this is the current site. So people who, I don't know how many people are online, Jesse, but if to say that it's indianmemoryproject.com. You can go online and see it while I speak about this. This is where I told you the context of everything circles back. So my father took photographs. Every photograph had a story because every photograph of his had a story. And these were the women in my life who were the storytellers. And this, really detailed story. And each one's memory about the same incident is different. And so in 2008, I wanted to do a book on weddings. It did not happen, but I started a Facebook group to collect pictures. And people started commenting different. And Dinesh, who's one of the things I really love about him, he will go with any idea I say, let's do. He will agree to any idea. Chal, ye karna hai, okay, come, let's do it. So he just happily gave a picture. And like yesterday, I was listening to a batchmate of mine speak about people like Dinesh, and not just because you are a photographer and anything. There was a faculty we had, MP Ranjan, who passed away, and he was one of those guys who would say, "Just do it, just do it. It's good. Just do it. It's very good. You don't have to think about money, resources, time, nothing. It's a good idea. Do it." Mainly because if you don't do it, you're going to wonder for the rest of your life as to what would have happened if I hadn't done it. You've got to at least try. It can be a failure. Never mind. I don't even call it failure anymore. Anything in my life, it is course correction. Things, the route just changes. So it's never mind. Didn't work, you tried. At least you know. But anyway, so this is Dinesh saying, take pictures. And then he started off this conversation because he himself is a storyteller. And evoked this whole conversation between people. And so this is how, other people started giving me photographs as well for this group. And somehow it took me, and I, in fact, recently discovered it was 2008 is when this idea sort of began. It took me 2 years for the penny to drop that this was a bigger idea, because suddenly there were people talking about partition. There were people talking about ideas. There were people talking about all kinds of things that became categories. And I love categories in terms of that, because essentially I'm organized and I like libraries, and I bunk school to go attend help a librarian in school. But it was something that I enjoyed, and WordPress gave me that platform. And that is when I took the idea, because suddenly it was a bigger idea that if I could put 20 pictures together of completely unrelated pictures, the idea that everything is connected and all I have to do is contextualize that connection, that it will fall into place. The 20 different pictures of Bombay, different times, it's still a story of Bombay, and therefore it is evidence. And all photographs are personal, to photographers at least. Almost all photographs are personal. And this was mainly that how people took pictures in family was also a form of social evidence. It was this way of how we document ourselves. And so why isn't that something that we're looking at? And these are the kind of queries that I had when I started this project. Also, it was started as a question. Is this possible? What I'm thinking, is this possible? And that is how it started. It was started as a question, and it turned out that it was, because in my mind I had sort of connected the dots. It is possible if, and it was a very organically built archive. All I had to do was keyword them, categorize them, write the text, get the text. Eventually it also grew, it became better, and the stories became more elaborate. I learned how to interview people. And that is something I think with portrait photography did for me, was it puts you in areas and atmospheres and environments with other people where if you don't have access, you're not going to get a good picture. If you don't have a relationship, you're not going to have a good picture. And that helps you with, we don't even know, but interview skills. You learn how to get stories out of people. What will make them tell you what they want to say? What will make them trust you? What will make them trust you enough to say, don't write that, and you will not write that. You will not exploit it. What will make you read between the lines, because you can see their laughter, you can see their tears, you can see what they're trying to evoke and how to use that interview skill to be able to write. So this was the first thing, and this is when I started it. I remember this. I said, okay, this is working. And then within 15 days, it got covered in the Guardian because I had just sort of sent it around on Twitter, and somebody from they've got, and that sort of started rolling. It Memory Project, I believe, has a life of its own. It was meant to be here, and it found a channel through me. That's it, and I just happened to be the right channel for that time or that idea. And I could categorize it. So now there are around 890 categories and around 6,000 keywords that you can search this archive with. There are around 220 stories. Not that many, but it has so much. It's full of information, and and one of the reasons why I keep doing it is because it gets me excited. It's the way I learn about India. It's the way we don't know. I don't know how clueless we are all about India. Even the most known person, even Nehru, who wrote Discovery of India, does not know enough about India. So can you imagine us, the little people who've not traveled enough, not spend our lifetime with you? It's a whole other. So this was my way of learning about it. This was my way of like, oh, okay, oh, this is what happens. I get so excited that I would want to share it with the world and become the conduit to another world. So, and then things like I started learning how to work electronically, and this is where the web. See, now again, going back to how the web education sort of helped, which was you quickly catch on to how technology works and measuring it by Google, trying to figure out what are they searching for when they come to this. I mean, God hands guitar Hindustan, all kinds of random search patterns, Indian bodybuilders, why God Saraswan think they are great. You don't know where these queries are from, but they will suddenly come to Memory Project. And the kind of stories, this is just a shadi picture, but there's a whole other story about how this picture was taken, how they fell in love, how a former president of India, Zakir Hussain, rescued them from a train. On the right-hand side, about how his grandfather's artworks went missing because during partition. The first student to attend Royal Academy of Art, the first group of students, I think this one was the first three. And these are just pictures, but we'll give you, and the visual detail, right? The dress, the attire, the pose, the texture, the photography technique, and it's so much evidence to be able to understand an image and to be able to understand the world. Again, I go back to through understanding the world through photography. This is on the left is Chiro's picture. In fact, he sent it to me. But can you imagine? It's such a simple picture of his father with a cat. That's the image, but the story around it it gives you an insight into a whole social idea of Bombay at that time, where young men were migrating to Bombay to work in companies, to live as bachelors, to all kinds of ideas that worked out, the technique and who took this photograph and how it was taken versus the other extreme, which is in the north. At the same time, this is a story about a queen, about how her father was the owner of the great Katia necklace, about how she lived her life, what kind of knowledge has she imparted, how these are the only few pictures that people cherish, right? And why do they cherish these pictures? What is so important about these pictures that these are the ones that are saved and these are the ones that are printed. This, for example, is a story about the opening of Ghaffar Market in Delhi. And otherwise it's just without any caption, without sitting in a photo album. It's the opening of Ghaffar Market and nothing else. But the things like you notice that the photographers there, and the people, the family who contributed were families were a form of photographers. The opening of the market, the whole story about partition, the refugee resettlement. These are the kind of details and ideas you start getting into. And I was You have no idea. Every time I get a story, and my mind is like ready to find some new thing that I can tell the world. It's so exciting. So each one is a movie. Each one is a story to tell. Now, this is some example. This is a story I got from a journalist's daughter who was traveling through India in 1947. She was working with Reuters, or she was traveling with the Reuters because she was a freelance journalist. But this is something I did not know. There was a time during 1947 when India was at odds with South Africa, and nobody knows that. No, nobody knows, but nobody remembers that part of history when there were signs like South Africans not allowed put up in the Taj Hotel, and and how we discuss the past, where you're blaming the other but not looking at your own selves as well, and to understand how your own selves, that we're all living in glass houses, and that everybody has history of their own that is we question it now, but at that time everybody felt it well valid, and which is why I talk about how time is a great context, and how issues, world issues, will belong to context and cultures, and we need to learn how to separate them. We are not just, the internet has just mixed everything up. Everybody's issues are everybody's issues. Everybody's issues are not everybody's issues, and it's just there's a need to re-look at things like this. And I love this image because for me it's a mystery that I needed to solve. I had to ask a friend what the hell was happening here. Why is this? And fortunately he's a history graduate, so he was like, oh, but this is what happened, and this is what happened around that time. I'm not really sure, but you can research it. And had this journalist's daughter not sent this picture to me, we may not have know about things like that. And that is the beauty of this archive, is having the trust of people who will send you stories, because mainly they rightly assume I'd be interested. I'm very interested. The New Yorker image I've only put up as something that sort of helped propel memory project to an international level, that when the New Yorker asked me to handle their Insta handle in 2015, and this sort of opened up the archive to a whole other audience of 2 million different kinds of people from all over the world. Again, initiating discussions, initiating ideas, initiating curiosity. And it was such a good thing, right, to be able to be a conduit to another world who doesn't know much about India. I mean, this is something I discovered, and even when studying in Britain, that they don't know much about, nobody really knows much about India. There was a old couple in their 70s who had landed up at the airport without a visa because they had no idea that that the control had been, that India was now independent, that they needed a visa to travel. And even when showing my work at University of Brighton, and I think one of the reasons why I even may have found admission in that was that they had no idea that people in urban cities live like that. That we have offices and we party and we hang out and we, so that in their idea, the idea was exoticizing the rural life, or the beautification, and everything is so pretty and everything is so, poverty is, it was a whole different, it was just an alternate universe for them. And I think that is, they couldn't believe it. And so this was something that I enjoyed. And I really loved the New Yorker editors because they were so excited about it as much. It rubs off, that you want to tell them stories. And it was very, very nice of them to do that. This is how Memory Project was taken offline. This was actually the Sensorium show curated by Prashant Panjiyar in Goa. And this is an opportunity to see a project like this offline, because in my mind it was all digital, or I had only seen it digitally, but also to see how to experiment with something, like how to install something like this within resources, and do it nicely. And this was a beautiful show. It was a big hit show in my mind, because I got so many emails about it. I got more stories one of the things that will happen is that suddenly people feel, as it should be, that that photograph has become valuable to them even more than it was earlier. And this is the handle of Instagram and Twitter, Facebook. You can choose your stream of poison and just join. So it'll be fun. Inspired, and just to sort of segue about how I mix the design, the hunger for research. I research everything. I like to research a lot, and 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 I'm happy with the grays. I'm very okay with things not being answered. I'm very okay with things being gray. I like it, in fact, because then it gives you more room to play and work around. And this is something that an opportunity again came in discussion about a show. Have been a sucker for crime novels. I love thrillers, crimes, mainly because it all sort of ties up with my one quest in life, which is what I want to solve puzzles, including myself, who I think everybody's a puzzle. And also just to draw into this idea of how to tell stories, but the idea of using something that interested me, which was crime, uh, and the idea that how forensic photography had never been looked at in India at all. We had not figured evidence photography as an art or craft itself, and that is something that I wanted to explore the idea. But how do I tell stories through Format Festival, which was the first exhibition that was done, and the theme was evidence, and I was like, this was going to be very exciting. So this is the next image after this is not safe for work. So if you have children online, or if you're below 18, just close your eyes for 2 minutes. But this was the exhibition done at Kemol. So this exhibition was done twice. This was once done in Britain at the Format International Festival, and then it was brought back and done in 2017 at Kemol Prescott during the Focus Festival. And the idea of studying how forensic photography started in India, why did it start, why did it get misappropriated or appropriated, both? Why did it? Who was using it for what kinds of? Where is the balance of power in that? Is it the criminal? Is it the crime? Is it the punisher? Is it the court? Is it the justice system? I mean, these are the kind of things. The lack of photography per se as well. So it was something that I was wanting to explore through 13 cases. And so this is just to show you the. So this is how it was shown in Britain during the Format Festival. And this is something on the right. What you see is actually the first murder case ever photographed in 1857. And the jury is still out on whether it was murder or suicide. Clearly, I mean, if you can read the story, it was clearly murder, but there was a lot of political play going on about this case. This was how it was displayed at Kemort. And there were a total of 13 cases with 13 stories around. It was another great, hugely enjoyable to understand photography through the eyes of the justice system and how it was used, sensationalized, falsely portrayed, rightly portrayed. It was an incredible experience to take people through these 13 cases and to understand how the investigative system works. It's not easy to find these images in India. They are all, as a criminal lawyer told me once, they're all wrapped up in a white potly and they're sent to an archive and nobody knows what's happening there. And but I've met a lot, I researched a lot, I met a lot of criminal lawyers, I met journalists, I spoke with friends who wrote about crime. It was a lot of different kinds of people. And this is how I come to my next series, which was impersonations, which was something that I started exploring with studio. And this was like something that this is where the beauty course comes in, because I could dress myself up. My grandmother's, and this is something where I merge history and my own photography at that time was to to do something in portraiture. This goes on the left is Razia. The right is. These are histories I read about. I read a lot of history, and it was a lot of things on culture, and it just helps. It adds all those little bits to be able to imagine an idea and propel that forward in my mind. This was another last of that. And this is something, at that time, I had a very interesting lady called Katya who would come to intern with me on memory project. She's actually, I might, for the lack of a better word, let's just call her an intern, but she was actually a PhD scholar who was writing an idea, a whole story on Indian archives and how they are run and how they are studied from the German university. And so she basically said, I said, who do you want to dress up as? She's like, Audrey Hepburn. So we quickly found a t-shirt. We quickly, and she had this beautiful red hair, and we dressed her up, and it was great fun to do something like this. Is the idea of who we imagine we would like to be, or whose life do you want to just see yourself as? Not even life, just a glimpse into that idea. And this was transfixed. Now, this is something that I had been wanting to do for a while, is do something as an ally of the LGBT community. And I liked the idea. I enjoyed the idea of the performance quality and the freedom that you could see on their faces, the pleasure that they found in being in beautifying themselves, so to delight themselves, and these are people I met, and I asked, and I took their permission to say, would you like to be photographed where you would like to dress up, and what is your idea of feminine beauty, and how do you embrace it, and what does it mean to you? And it is all a big, almost all of my work actually is more of a question, because I don't have answers for everything. And this also helped me research. I talked to lots of people in the queer community, people who helped me understand things, correct terminologies, ask the right questions. And it also so interesting, you discover that to each person this means different. It's not one big solidified understanding of who they want to be. They just express it differently and they enjoy it. And this is something that so the brief was very, I knew exactly how I wanted to photograph them, which was looking at the screen, at the camera, mainly because I wanted that acknowledgement of the viewer. I wanted that eye contact. I wanted people to get the unfamiliar to be familiar, and I liked that idea of you enjoy these ideas of being the bridge, that you want people to understand what you have come to understand, or you understand more, or that there are, and this was the time when there was, this was when it was not decriminalized, and to understand people's struggles and what delight it is to have we should be honored to have different people in our lives, generally speaking, and because they only enrich your life, they don't do anything else. And by we, I mean the non-LGBTQ community, which is decided that this is normal, which it isn't. And I used to joke with a friend of mine, and I say, you guys should stop. You're calling yourself a minority. You're not a minority. It's not a minority. There are lots of people. And people used to all laugh along and say that, yeah, it's amazing. But this was something that the brief was, choose how you decide. You decide how you want to dress up. You decide how you want to do anything. You decide everything. All I'm telling you, this is the frame, and anything, and I will put a background in the back, which I would like to use to amplify and resonate the frame. That everything else is up to you. And so these were people who were makeup people, who were just who were getting into makeup, who had decided that they who had some of them had embarked upon a transition series. Some of them did not want to transition. It was all kinds of different people. Kumar, in fact, on the right is I'm quite pleased with this picture because we became very good friends because of that. Because of the shoot, we didn't know each other before that. Corey and I also became good friends, where Kumar just recently featured in a Titan ad, and I thought that was such an incredible. This is exactly what I intended, and I hoped that a work like this could do. And there are lots of people who've done work like this, work with the as allies, but this is the idea: is to get people to embrace and enjoy, and everything is and to have to as equal as we can be, and I think that's incredible, and as equal as everyone should be. But this was a beautiful, yeah, I learned a lot with this, and I totally liked it. I enjoyed it. This is just leading to, after this is just taking you quickly through my design work, which was of course I continue to be a book designer. I continue to be a branding designer. I enjoy it as much. Everything in my world feeds off each other. They have to. I don't think I could have ever done one thing ever. I don't think I would have gotten bored of it, because I think my mind is like that. Fortunately, I've learned how to find things, and this gives me the opportunity to be able to invent work and also be of use to some of clients to be able to do work like this. This was a book, coffee table books for well spun. These were using stock. A lot of these were stock images. But it was, again, this is something I deeply enjoy doing, designing books. And again, it's a cinematic storytelling. It's cinema on paper. Anant Joshi, catalog for Rashid Rana. I work a lot with artists and curators. I enjoy it. That's actually a very interesting time. You're getting side knowledge by doing book about how artists are and how artists work with. This is for Gauri Gill in the 1984. The small booklet with her. This is something I want to just show about how a branding exercise, which was 50 years of contemporary art, and I just did the logo and decided the identity of the show. Things like typefaces and the do's and the don'ts and the brand strategy, not the strategy, but the branding ideas ahead. But 2 years later is eventually when I also got the opportunity to design the catalog. And this took us actually almost 2.5 to 3 years to do. And I worked with Geeta Kapoor, with Shireen from Kemold, wonderful, great clients to work with, because we are all sticklers to get it right. And those clients are lovely. And there's an open mind. Everybody, it's a discussion. It's not an instruction. It's and I like collaborative exercises. I hugely enjoy them. These are inside spreads. These are also the inside spreads. This was the last book I did with Vivan. This was again a pleasure to work with. This was done with Tulika Books in Delhi with Indu. And we designed the photography work, or using photography as in different media and different formats. There was a lot to learn here. This was written by a lady called Ruth Rosengarten, who is a brilliant writer, because it was like reading a story rather than it being very extra academic language. And it was very well written. I enjoyed this book. This won the Illustrated Book of the Year, 2019, the awards thing. And this is something, I'm just taking you through some of the design work just to show you the interdisciplinary aspect of the work, which is, I designed maps. This is something I zoned into. This is again like feeling like I'm coding something, but every single line of these maps are hand-drawn. And so this is the entire map of 3 cities. It took me 6 months to make each. This is something I started doing last year, and with the memory company, this is what I'm doing is actually trying to develop products that are based in this geography and this cultural space, and how to use that knowledge to create contemporary products. And so this was we have 400 festivals. Uh, so this is a calendar I did. This is my latest client, and I'm only showing this because the show is ending. And I really want to show that in my after this lockdown, he's my only subject, whom I can really play with, and I can color him and twist him, but it's great fun because there's something that other than a human being that is alive, and that one can actually have fun with. So yeah, he's my subject. This is the last image that I wanted to show. This is this is something I'm working on now, and this is just the teaser image to take you what the next project will be, which is conceptual and fictional, but I'm excited about it. And I don't know when it'll be done, but this is the story. Join or else is my point.
Wow.
Wow. That was a lot of talking. Thank you so much for listening to it patiently.
This has been phenomenal.
So that it's but I also wanted to say that the thing is that this is the benefit of having people like Chiro and Raj as well, who are Bombay people. And when I talked about documentation, right, it was just that they both are interesting archivists in their own right. All photographers are archivists in some way. You are preserving time somewhere. But there is, for Chiro's work, for example, the other day he posted something about the library, the Sassoon library, which is shut down. And he had managed to just be lucky, or at right time, right place, as Joseph Scannelberg would say that he managed to document a lot of that work 2 years ago. Right, Chiro?
Yeah, it was actually not the Sassoon.
Sorry, not the Sassoon Gallery. I'm sorry, I got that wrong.
Yeah, People's Free Reading.
People's Free.
This was a few years back. Yeah, must be about 2-3 years.
2017.
Yeah, when I think we had shown the work, but I think we were photographing for about 2.5 years before.
2.5 years.
Yeah. So we were basically photographing the collection of the library because, this is again something that fascinates me, which is old books, especially illustrated books. I have a thing for illustrations. I mean, in fact, I remember when I was with Time Out, trying to get in a lot of illustrators to work with us. And it was something which people used to tell me, oh, but you're a photographer and you're replacing photography with illustration. But the thing is, the illustrations could do things which we couldn't do with photography, and or rather sometimes illustrations seemed like a better way of dealing with a subject. So I think certain instincts of mine kind of came together on that project. I know for a fact that Jerry is deeply interested in, obviously as an author, he's deeply interested in books. And I mean, during our travels, I mean, we used to often talk about this and also talk about the fact that, this is again a common narrative, right? I mean, how the reading habit is reducing. I mean, we are reading, I mean, on other devices. Yeah, but the book per se is sort of, and I kind of kept thinking, how does one photograph something like this? And it was interesting because, some years back, when I think Anil Dharkar was planning to start the one of the lit fests of the two that happened in Bombay, one of those, I forget which, I think Lit Live, Tata Lit Live. Jerry had kind of mentioned to me that, they're planning to do a commemorative book, and would I be interested in shooting something for it? And we were discussing what one could shoot. And he said, maybe you could do pictures of, people reading. And the more I kept thinking about it, it seemed a bit of a odd thing, because if I'm saying that people aren't reading enough, and I were to put in pictures of, do pictures of 20 people reading in different
20, 20 being the ideal figure for photographers to prove that it's a good idea.
It somehow didn't make sense. And I think somewhere, I think the germ of the idea started there. And I remember doing a story for Time Out at that point, which included many different aspects about how, I was seeing on the train, more people reading on the phone, things like that. And I also did one little section there, which was right at the end, which was about statues of luminaries in Bombay, where you found that most of the statues, people were posing with books. Okay. And this I was aware of because, I mean, in some of my other work, photographing architecture in Bombay, I had done photographs of these statues for those books and things like that. So suddenly it was, we were seeing things like, Mayavati at that time was erecting her own statues, and she posed with her handbag. And, there were these luminaries from another time where they posed with books. And I think it was one of those interesting things where you said, you wonder what people in the future would be posing with. I mean, I can't envision
Mobile
any,
phones.
Exactly, that's what I kind of thought of.
iPads, mobile phones.
Yeah,
No, but just basically, no, but also because why I brought that up is also that that's become an archive just because that library is now closed its doors, right?
Exactly.
Suddenly, and it has become an archive over 2 years.
Yeah,
it wasn't an archive before that.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, a library in itself, I mean, by default is an archive of knowledge.
Yeah.
And to me, to photograph a library, I mean, these were all grand spaces, I mean, huge spaces, tall columns, marble busts, I mean, all that Minton tiling. But I think photographing the space didn't make sense. I mean, to me, the core of a library is its collection, and that's how the idea really started, where we started.
I agree. Yeah.
When we started going through its collection, it had 40,000 books. I think we must have gone through a few thousand. I photographed about 900. So I think it was sort of, and I also find that a lot of my work, I mean, is sort of, feeds into my interest as a collector. And I think as a collector, you are an archivist in that sense, I
You're just bordering on hoarders.
Exactly. So I think it's a way of calling a hoarder, you call yourself a collector. So be it, I like, for instance, my work on public clocks in Bombay. I think in a way it's sort of me being a collector.
Not just that, Shiro. In fact, that is something that I've thought about often. Is that also somewhere it also becomes a conceptual exercise, and it becomes a conceptual exercise because what you're doing is somewhere like the memory project, presenting ordinary ideas, but forcing people to just forcing them to look at it with a different point of view, because they're like it's shown like that, it must be special. There's something amiss, and that is forcing perspectives that makes it more conceptually.
In fact,
but can I ask you a question about the India memory project?
Yeah.
Can I come back to the India memory project?
Yeah.
I just want to ask you how easy or how open have people been about contributing photographs? Do people tend to, I'm triggering it from the word hoarding, which you just used. Would they rather hoard it for their family, or are they happy to, go public? Because one is the photograph, two is, which is what is so special about the project, is the story. And the story means that there's then, names, and there's times, and there's families, and there's location. So you want to talk a bit more about that? I think that's quite interesting. And I've often wondered when I've gone through the stories that would I do this myself, or so how does it work for you?
So several things work at what entries come. People like to be people will either completely censor themselves, meaning they will not give the story, they will not give the photograph, or they will give all of it. They might even give all of it. By give all of it, I mean giving all information and talking to you about it. But they might ask you to censor some stuff and say, please don't say that, or don't say this, which is fine. You don't want to say it, you don't want to say it. Why should I be the one causing it? And but one of the reasons why entries, one of the obstacles of sending entries is that you have to write a story. By a story, I mean you have to at least write bullet points so that I can follow you up. Because in most stories, I will edit the story. I will ask you questions. It's like an investigative exercise. Then you get both parties to investigate, including me. So I will be fact checking, or I'm cross checking, or we are finding, reading between the lines, asking them to check with other family members. So that is there. Then there are people who will. There are other little lines which features that one family member wants to give it, but the other family members don't want to. There is politics between family members because whose name gets written on the credit. All kinds of other things that play out, or people just collectively decide that no, we give the whole family as credit. It depends. That those are some things I'm not here to argue or dispute. But those are just. But to answer your queries, it's all kinds of things that happen, and it's also case by case. There are people who have given stories to other publications and want to copy paste that story to the memory project. That's not going to work. That is not something I'm going to accept. You have to re-edit the story, you have to reformat, you have to relook it. Also, the two things that people, and I've told this to many families, why I would not accept this, because it's happened twice that people write their own stories, and then I don't want to, and especially a lot of people who are writers and stuff like that, who don't want it edited because they don't want to take away the creative writing aspect of it, which I completely understand. But then I tell them to not give it, because one is that the archive is actually based on a very simple format. It needs to be Google translated in 50 different languages. It needs to be read very quickly. The photograph has to be contextualized, and it has to just touch upon things and be emotional just about. I don't want to go into a whole scenery painting, which creative writing does do, and it fulfills whole other need. So those are the kind of challenges that come with me, and then you face them case by case.
May I ask one follow-up question before I hand over to Raj and Jiro again? So that's you as an archivist. You're also an archivist as a photographer. And a lot of the work you do as a photographer is about creating memories for people.
No. No.
No, let me
Yeah, okay.
let me complete my theory.
Yeah.
Whether it was photographing people in their homes, whether it's photographing people, at work, whether it's photographing the LGBTQ community, have you considered, or are you working with them at the same time with text, so that in a way becomes the memory and the story in words? Maybe not to go into the India Memory Project right now, because I think you have a cutoff of 50 years old or whatever. But have you considered that too? Or do you work on it? Or you ask people to already here's the photograph, think of the story?
The transfixed series, I interviewed and recorded all of them because I had a lot of queries, and I wanted to understand. I wanted them to tell me what they felt. So there was a lot of so all of that was recorded. And that would eventually become something. It might eventually be a part of the project. The project is in my head completed, but I've not yet decided how to present it. And I might even just do a whole digital exhibition and not even worry about anything more. It was shown once at Project 88, but with a very small 6 pieces. But So I don't know, but yeah, I've interviewed that. But as far as my current photography goes, I've decided I'm not creating memories. I'm playing, and I want to continue to play, because first and foremost, it has to give me pleasure.
Those are fictional memories, na? So it's still a memory.
Yeah, but it's
But anyway, Raj,
yeah.
over to you. I'm sure you have some questions to ask.
No, just a few thoughts here. Just a lot of random thoughts after seeing
Very
all
good.
this work.
I'm also random.
And no, after seeing all this work, I mean, I'm familiar with some of it, but some of it I saw for the first time. So just 3 or 4 things that you said that I really enjoyed, which I just want to sort of repeat for the audience and just, maybe for you to reflect on. A book is cinema on paper. I thought that is
I know that
absolutely
was
beautiful.
brilliant. Yeah.
That is beautiful. And context, the importance of context rather than content, which is today even more so much of an abused word in the era of the internet and social media. And I mean, a bunch of other things. I mean, the fact that the sea is probably a grounding factor for Bombay City, which is a theory I've also always held, and I'm guessing Chiro might agree as well.
Imagine Chiro in Afghanistan, or by Afghanistan I mean a dry, landlocked place.
I thought you were making fun of Thane in that.
No.
Sorry, Chiro.
Have a creek.
You can, of course, ignore the fact that Jesse and I are over here. But anyway, that's all right.
We remember we said outside of the country, a dry place. We did not say the D word.
Well, we have a
We
creek.
Punjabis have big hearts, so we don't.
That's true. That's true.
No, but these were lovely. Also, in a very strange way, and I'm just thinking out aloud, I think a portraitist is an archivist to begin with. And I don't mean this in terms of the just the idea of what these are memories for people or something of that sort. But first of all, people obviously change. Somebody you photographed Konkana 12 years ago and Abhay 14 years ago.
Yeah.
They are very different people right
Absolutely.
now, both visually and otherwise.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I mean, it's apart from the fact that people change, when you're making a portrait, and especially, I mean, I was quite stunned by some of your portraits of your friends, especially the ones that are from the 06 to 2012, I guess, time frame. Because also I was seeing those for the first time. Some of the other stuff I've seen before. The moment which you make that shutter is an archive in itself, because even if the person hasn't changed, often that moment which we identify as a powerful portrait is something that surprises both you and the person being photographed.
Yeah.
It's something that is just, it's almost like you don't recognize them. It's almost like that one split second where you go like, oh, this is them, but you still don't recognize where did that come from.
Yeah.
And that's why I think this thing as an archivist as well. There's no question here. It's just
no, it's not a question, but it's something that I like to. I enjoy talking about work in humorous terms a lot, because I feel that it just lightens everything in your mind as well, and it helps me focus. Actually, it's very bizarrely that humor and focus for me has a connection, and I'm not sure how to point it out. But it's something that I say as a joke, which is that when people say, a lot of my friends will say, don't make me look fat, okay? Please don't make me look fat. And my answer to them is, 10 years from now, you are not going to look how fat you are. You will remember how young you were. And, that is, which is accurate, because when I look at my old pictures, I'm not thinking about, I was fat. I was like, oh my God, I was so pretty. I was so young. What were we doing here? Oh my God. The stories that come up because of that. And so, every photograph is personal. Every photograph holds the memory of the world, is the truth. And like I said, there are what better than photography to tell us that there are billions of point of views.
Oh, no, absolutely. And, one thing you mentioned, that you've gone from being somebody who always loved natural light to slowly starting to appreciate what studio light or artificial light can do. I think a lot of, I guess a lot of people have gone through a similar phase. I know I have. But I was also thinking about this the other day, that it's not so much about light. When I think of photographing inside a studio versus outside a studio, it's also the space. Because studios tend to be, not always, but often sterile spaces, which are blank canvases, which can be a great thing, but not necessarily. You don't have the space working on you as such. But when you're photographing in someone's home, or you're photographing on the street, or in an Irani cafe, you're making a portrait of one of the patrons over there. It's not just the fact that it's sunlight streaming in through the window. It's also what that space is doing to you and to that person. And that, I mean, the best of studio photographers, though that's a terrible term, but the best of photographers working in a studio will create that magic out of something else.
And you have to have a very good music list.
Yes, of course.
But the thing is that I understand what you're saying about space, but funnily enough, I have not experienced the sterile studio space in terms of my own work. I have always had a home studio, or I have worked on client sites, or it's been outdoor shoots. And so I don't think I even remember hiring a studio to do a shoot so far.
Right.
So far that's then I usually all the series that I photographed is everything at home. My work from home studio.
It's such a different term today, right? No, but I think that's the thing, right? These spaces now that you say that even your more recent work, which you've been using light for, the space is such an important aspect in terms of influencing both us and the people we are photographing. And it's so ironic. I mean, with the pandemic and the lockdown, there have been, of course, a lot of people making these FaceTime portraits and lockdown portraits. And I still don't know what I think of them. But the first thing that I think of, that if I ever shoot it, the thing that's stopping me is like, wait, the only space that I have to work with is my own space, rather than that interaction of person A and person B being in a room with that light and how we respond to it.
Building relationships with people, with strangers, is going to be immensely difficult.
Of course,
you can't do that online. There's no way it can be done. So,
also with the memory project, one thing I find...
I'll come.
No, I was just saying one last point. I think that with memory project, the thing two things I find most fascinating. I love the fact that you've always used the word guardian of the photograph. I think it's a lovely term with a lot of nice connotations. But also, even there, and I think you briefly did touch upon this without exactly saying it. The fact is that memory is so unreliable. You have no idea whether you're actually getting the right story. And frankly, the person giving the photograph often has no idea whether they are giving the right story also, because I've discovered photographs from 40, 50 years ago, and I've shown them around to people in my house, to my grandmom or to my late granddad, and they've all, I don't know, everyone has a different version of who shot the picture, of where was it shot. Somebody says it was Dadar, somebody says it was Karachi. And
but the thing is that that's something that also gets included, right? That doubt that I can actually, I would be able to say, I have no idea where this picture was taken. It could be Dadar, it could be Karachi. And that sort of gives it that inhumane element of doubt to every story. So I encourage people to say I don't know. I encourage them to say, you can just say this or that. You're free to say that you don't know something. You don't have to have facts for every backup, because you're not chasing facts as much as you're chasing the idea of
memories. Right. I don't know if you've ever reflected on this, but once you started receiving all these photographs, did that directly influence the way you made your own photographs?
Yeah, it did. One, of course, it taught me a lot more about the techniques and the thing which I keep forgetting and everything. But it was also it helped me it encouraged me to research more.
Okay.
It helped me to say that the world is completely black and white, and what you have read in one book is not necessarily true. So dig deeper. And so I do that. I like to do that. And I've used it ever since I started even doing work that required some that sort of had a message or didn't have a message, or to ask questions. It helped me a big deal to help is ask questions, and
Right.
to totally be okay to say I don't know. So
Okay.
I don't, because I don't have answers to everything. And but I love what I do. Is the whole point.
That shows, that very clearly shows.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to.
Yeah, can I ask?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
Jesse.
Yeah. So one part actually has been already asked by Raj, is that I just wanted to also ask that did this memory project help you in any way to redefine or refine your own style of photography? Or so probably you've already answered that. This is one thing that I wanted to ask, is that you create portraits and you talk about spaces, you talk about using natural light, you also talk about graduating at times, or maybe shifting in between using artificial light as well, that you've done with one particular project. Now, my question is that how many times are these images, we know that they are aware that you are there to shoot, you've taken permission, you are in their space or they are in your space, place, but how many times do you really create a candid moment out of it? So when they are aware, but you still catch them unawares with a portrait. Do you do that, or it just you shoot everything when they are aware of it?
Both. It happens when they're aware, and but the thing is that this is where time is our friend. When sometimes you have longer times, and conversation helps. I mean, I can talk a lot, or encourage them to tell me stories a lot, so that they forget that you are there to take a picture, but because they are telling you a story. And so it's both. And sometimes they just forget, and some after a while, especially with friends and family that I photograph a lot, they don't even care that I have a camera in my hand, or it's like somebody carrying a pencil. And so it depends on how much time one has spent. Sometimes there are difficult shoots, sometimes there are good shoots, sometimes you feel that it wasn't enough and that the guard was not down, and what it's also what you want out of that picture eventually. uh,
Yep.
you don't have a perfect idea of any picture actually until it's done.
Things
So
are unfolding in front of you, and
they
you,
unfold, yeah, and there are different ones, and but the idea is to make them comfortable as quickly as possible with your presence.
okay. Now there are two
And
follow-up questions very quickly. One is that you said that you have to make them comfortable, and every time you're not dealing with people who are known to you, and every time that moment of being a patang champion
yeah,
will not come your way. So
no,
you might have faced many situations wherein the common ground of starting a conversation and continuing with that, building upon that conversation, might not just look so smooth, or might not happen so smoothly.
yeah.
And you get into a situation that time is less, and you still have to do what you're supposed to do. And
Yeah.
how do you manage those situations?
See, one of the things I discovered, the less people in the room, the better.
Okay.
Like people get very distracted by other people looking at the photographer. I mean, that is something I've learned.
Yeah.
So the less people, so yeah, I will not get a patang moment, but I have seen that then when there are 5 people there looking at the photographer photographing that other person, you are not going to get a good photograph because they are too distracted by all this stuff going on. They get very conscious. Number 2 is that I research enough to find out that I have to find a common ground. It was so hard for me. It was so bizarre, right? In the Salzburg series, The hardest person for me to connect was a gentleman from Pakistan, and I thought that was going to be the easiest because ये तो हमारा brother है ना, meaning he's our neighbor. पड़ोसी है. So, but it was the hardest because one, he had not seen women photographers. He got very conscious. Nothing about everything, every trick in my sleeve I tried. Bollywood I tried, everything I tried. But eventually chai, he made me 3 cups of tea and that did not help. But what eventually helped was a discussion on his family photographs. The moment he opened that album is when I was in. And it's also just sometimes you just have luxury of time, because if you didn't have time, then you're just walking away with an average. It will do photographs, but it's not going to be a good photograph, or the ideal one, or the one you know, right? Your own in your mind that you got a good picture, even when you're on a roll.
That's wonderful. And another thing linked to this in my mind is that you've already said that at times they become conscious. They have allowed you to create images, click images. That's why you two are there wherever you are. And but you are trying to open up, and they are trying to get easy in their own way. Things are getting complicated. The things become easy, and you pick up your big, huge camera. Doesn't it intimidate them as well at times? That camera.
I've decided not to carry big, huge cameras.
So that
yeah.
Come to that.
Number one, no.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to come. So
yeah, I mean, until I don't know. It's not something I think about much. One is that I don't give so much importance to the tool. It's there because it's supposed to help me take a photograph. But the engagement is between you and me. It is not between the camera and you. And that is something I aim for. Because in fact, I used to ask Dinesh, I said, what is the trick of being invisible? He said, you just be invisible and you will get a great picture. It's not that easy, to be invisible and get great pictures. Because you are carrying that camera, and in our case, especially being women in India, you are not invisible. I mean, for certain access you are, but not for everything. And but I try and establish that the connection is with me, not the camera, and the camera will just help us.
So what is that camera that you carry? Some small ones, or what is it? Because people will be.
I started when we were in NID, we started with the Nikon or Nikon. I don't even know what is the right pronunciation. Does anybody know? Yeah. It's like a gift chip situation. But it was a Canon PowerShot. It was a Canon Mark 1, then Mark 2, then now it's a Fuji. So, yeah. And actually, I use a phone a lot now. I don't have a problem with the phone per se. So, yeah, I will keep it updated. I will make sure I photograph in RAW and stuff like that. So I can work on some stuff on Photoshop. But I don't have a problem with the mobile phone as a camera. With that device.
There is one question on YouTube by Chetan Dodwad. He's asking that any particular work which influenced you the most, which made the context point so important to you?
Advertising, design. When you are doing that kind of work, you get trained in context. And also that the same word, the same meaning can mean so many different things in different cultures and different spaces. I mean, and then you hone that in. A red in India means different. A red in Mexico means different. A red in Russia means different. And you start to learn how to use that. So context, that was my biggest epiphany in my creative life, is that curiosity is everything, and second, context is king.
I think if I was to just expand that a bit, when you work professionally for someone else, and by which I mean not that you're being paid or whatever it is, but that you're given a brief and you're given an objective. The objective teaches you the context.
Yeah.
So why are you doing it? How do you have to do it? What do you have to produce? Which is advertising, which is marketing, which is design, uh, and which is not free-flowing photography, for instance.
Yeah.
Having said that, once you're also engaging with photography seriously enough to create work which you have an objective, and it's not necessarily that you want to, impress a gallery or make a book, but you want that photograph to say something which you want to say, because that's the way you feel or that's the way you see. Objective, context, all these things are.
Yeah, even in branding, right?
This
Or
is
when you're
very important
advertising,
when you-
who is your audience? Who's going to buy it? Is it the guy next door? Is it the Queen of England? Who's buying it? And then that's context. That is how everything is going to be designed. Who's going to like this? So this broad idea of the whole masses, public doesn't know what they want. Is my point. But anyway, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Jesse, over to you. Thank you, Anusha. Thank you, Raj.
Thank you.
Chirosh seems to have left.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Chirosh not here.
So it's been an amazing session. Let me be honest that we all were hooked on, and on YouTube, all we were listening or reading were fabulous things. A wonderful session and very unique, and the series is so cool. So while you were going through all those wonderful work, people have been commenting about it.
Thank you.
That's phenomenal. And I think with every such session, and particularly today, it's a different insight that we got into how you create, connect, and what you feel about photography. That it is only one medium when you say that, and so many different versions, the way people present their work. And I think that's been quite amazing. And thank you so much again.
Thank you.
For taking your time out. And but I just remember that you forgot to feed your cats.
No, he sort of saw, he mewed a little and then he went away. So I figured he discovered cats can know, they know that it must be very important, but she's not responding. Yeah, I'll now feed them. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Raj. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Dinesh. Thanks, Anusha. Great seeing you after such a long time.
I know.
I mean, we are
time,
neighbors. but
Agle
yeah.
saal, yaar.
Well, Bombay people are special, but Bombay people don't meet each other. So,
Yeah.
Jesse?
That's
We need
not
a-
true.
We basically need somebody from Delhi to come and coordinate between us.
I have spent some time in Bombay. So the one thing that I've found that everybody is very busy, and everybody's also
Yeah.
so that's the famous quote that everybody says that बहुत busy है, बहुत busy.
Busy doing
I think-
nothing. But
Yeah, but the thing is, I think people come here to get busy. I'm very clear that, either to busy earning money or busy getting attention or busy. You need to be on some agenda. So yeah, it's busy. There's no space to relaxing, which is why people work hard and party hard. That's the.
No, it's a wonderful city with wonderful people. I will vouch for that.
Yeah.
I lived there 2.5 years.
I've been there, and I
So-
missed it the most the moment I left it. So it grows on you slowly, and
Yeah. Okay, good night.
yeah. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Good
Bye,
night.
people. Good
See you
night.
guys soon.